Today's episode is sponsored by Puffin Books UK. Good morning, campers, and welcome to Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. I'm B.
And I'm Zach.
And this week, we read Chapter 11, Clarisse Blows Up Everything. That's phrased kind of weird. I just realized, instead of Clarisse blows everything up, I don't know, blows up everything is kind of a weird phrasing of that.
It's kind of like one of those things, B, where it's like she technically did blow things up or blow things out of proportion, because if she did anything that she wasn't supposed to, they probably would have been fine. But she blew it.
Oh, so you mean like the double meaning?
Yeah, it's a little bit of the double meaning. Like if she didn't fire at Charybdis, she didn't do any of her stuff or strain her engines on her steamboat.
Yeah, so this episode... This chapter doesn't go exactly how I had hoped in our last episode.
Oh yeah, this chapter certainly did not blow.
Last episode, I made some predictions about whether or not Clarisse would, help them find the Golden Fleece, and she seems pretty disinterested in that, kind of mean to everybody. So that's not really the direction. I mean, I imagine they kind of do help each other out a little bit, because they are, guests on her boat. There's a weird dynamic going on between Clarisse and Annabeth and Percy and Tyson. It's just kind of a weird...
Well, they're more like frenemies a little bit. Like, they're friendly, but they're also enemies.
Yeah, it's strange. It's not like she just, pushes them off the boat or something and leaves them for dead. So at least that doesn't happen.
I'm thinking that, Clarisse just has, you're gonna walk the plank, and they just make, a bunch of, the Confederate soldiers just plank, literally do the plank. And they have to, walk in the dead soldiers.
Yeah, there is a moment where she does threaten them.
Oh, yeah, lock him up where we keep the enemy spies.
Yeah, he's she says, guess for now. Captain, take them below, assign them hammocks on the berth deck. If they don't mind their manners, show them how we deal with enemy spies. So I don't know how they deal with enemy spies. It can't be great.
B, I'm not privy to, I don't know, torture or what they do to enemy spies back in the Civil War, but I would imagine it's not a pretty thing at all.
Not great, Bob. It's not great. Yeah, so we find out sort of the logic behind the Confederate soldiers, because I was kind of confused about how that, meshed with the whole ancient Greek situation. And basically, we learn that because Ares is her dad, they kind of, all losing sides of every, war and battle are, indebted to him somehow. They're, his servants, so that's why they're listening to everything Clarisse is saying.
I'm sure in our politically gray climate, whose wins aside now, Ares is just everyone's free.
Yeah, I imagine, the Cold War, what would that even be? You know what I mean?
Well, it would just be, a bunch of people, in their tanks, and then there would just be, ash, and then there would just be, spooky skeletons.
So I guess literal wars that happen with, weapons and all that. Anyway, this is why the Confederates are, beholden to Clarisse. It's also a weird dynamic, because they're still Confederates, so they still, don't like Yankees. It's a weird thing.
Reading this chapter, I was thinking in my brain that Rick Riordan really liked the Civil War, because he goes into, nerdy detail on so many things, such as the class of the ship.
Yeah.
He talks about the guns, and then he has the jokes with Percy Jackson, oh, your name's Jackson, eh? Percy's oh, no, I'm from New York. Ah, a darn Yankee. It's such great comedy.
Yeah. And I keep thinking about, the implications of these, kind of racist zombie people. What if, one of them was a person of color? What if it was a black character came onto the ship with all of the Confederate soldiers? Would they be racist towards them? Would they be oh, why aren't you a slave? What is their... Because they seem to be still in the headspace of the Confederate army.
Well, they are dead, and that's where they were in time. And you know what? I would imagine what would happen is Clarisse would just snap her fingers, and they would not say a thing, or it'd be something that would be something so off-colored, and then Rick Riordan would have to either have Percy or Clarisse or someone be hey, you can't say this right now because you're all dead, or they would say nothing.
Yeah,
they would just be compliant.
Because it is kind of creepy to have them helping when they're clearly not great, Bob. It's a weird situation.
I think the whole point of this chapter is when they're on this ironclad ship is just the joke of having like a Civil War thing in a story that's set like almost like an urban fantasy, and having, hey, why do we have a Civil War ship going through this very Greek trial? It's supposed to be like something that's humorous. Same as with like the Lestragonians and them being Canadian. That's supposed to be something that's just humorous to kids. Like you don't understand like, oh, why did we fight the Civil War? It's just the idea of, oh my God, these things from the Civil War are helping us in modern day. They don't know what a cell phone is. LOL.
Yeah, I think it's him like trying to combine also like American lore with ancient Greek lore. Like, oh, see, like there's also dead soldiers from other periods of time who would contribute to Ares's quest, or in this case, is Clarisse's, one and the same kind of, in this case, because she's kind of like doing his bidding a little bit.
Yeah, and when it comes to this chapter, I find that having those humorous elements to this actually really does work, because there's like parts like later on when the whole engine room's on fire and they have the skeleton like come out and he's on fire, like, well, there's the boiler room's about to explode and none of us can get out there or we'll be vaporized. Like, I think that's supposed to be the joke.
Yeah, I love how nonchalant he's kind of like, we're being vaporized. Like, they're already skeletons, so it's kind of like, I got nothing to lose.
Well, I was expecting it to kind of be like the droids in the prequel movies where they somehow have like intelligence and emotions and feel pain. That's not a robot. It's almost like that kind of where it's like, I'm not going in there. I'm already dead, but I don't want to die again. I don't want to be super dead.
Yeah, like, why would it have any motivation? Yeah, that kind of doesn't make sense. I mean, I guess they can't help if they're disintegrated. Like, they double die or whatever, but their souls are, like, contained within their skeletons. And if those are disintegrated, there's, like, nothing holding them.
You know what the most ironic thing about this chapter is, B?
What?
We're in October and we're talking about skeletons.
We are, yes.
We're getting down and spoopy.
It's the beginning of the skeleton war. I got my whole Halloween outfit on today. I got my t-shirt with the hedgehogs dressed in little Halloween costumes on it.
And for me, I'm just getting my Halloween costume ready. B, what are you doing for Halloween? Any Halloween plans?
Well, there's always Halloween plans, Zach. That's the life that I lead. There's definitely going to be a party happening.
But our listeners don't know that.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, if you knew anything about me, you would know I'm a Halloween person. I'm a holiday person in general. So yeah, definitely going to be a party. Going to be snacks, like a cheese ball shaped like a pumpkin, you know, themed decor, lot of lights shaped like bats. That's a very important aspect of Halloween, is lights shaped like bats. I don't know what my costume is going to be. Actually, I might be a pumpkin. Maybe not.
Be an adorable pumpkin. Be like the great pumpkin.
Like a whimsical pumpkin. Yeah, not a scary pumpkin. Like a... like the kind of costume a baby would wear, but on a person, on like a grown adult person.
I'm just imagining like your gross pumpkin would be the next day you actually start putting like flock on it so it looks like mold. Like, oh no, this pumpkin's getting a little grody.
Oh yeah, like just have it age. Yeah, so I would be like a cute pumpkin, and then my partner would be like a grotesque nightmare monster pumpkin. Because just that contrast is funny. You know, just me like in basically an orange onesie with a little hat. Not quite a onesie. I feel like I'm infantilizing this a bit too much, but...
For me, what's going to be happening is I'm going to be dressing my dog up, Rosie, in like a little like Velociraptor outfit, and I'm going to dress up as Laura Dern in Jurassic Park, so I'm going to be Ellie.
That's so good.
This is an actual thing that's happening because my other friends were doing Jurassic Park stuff, and I'm like, I'll just do this because I like it to be funny.
Is Rosie gonna hate the heck out of you for making her dress up like a raptor?
Hey, you know what's sad? Trying to find like waist-high shorts, like cargo shorts, is a pain in the butt to find for a dude.
For a dude, yeah, I imagine it must be hard to find for a dude. You might just have to get oversized and just kind of pull them up high, like Fred Mertz style. Are you gonna wear a wig and stuff?
Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna be wearing the wig, and I'm gonna.
Oh my god, like, that's really funny.
If you don't know this about me, folks, but like, I will pick the funniest costume that you think of. Like, I went to a 50s party once, and I dressed up as Marty McFly.
It's pretty good.
Just because it was clever, and I won the costume contest. Every costume contest there was at work, I always would win. Such as we had a 90s party. Take a guess who I dressed up as.
Oh god, I don't know.
I dressed up as R.L. Stine, and I brought the little briefcase with the Goosebumps like logo on it. We love sidebarring. But like when it comes to this chapter, a lot and nothing happens at the same time.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
This chapter opens up and they are now friends-stages, or I don't know what you call friend hostages, on this boat that is just filled with dead people. And it's almost funny because, like we said before, like the comedy comes from being like a fish out of water, no pun intended.
Percy Jackson is a fish out of water story. It's pretty accurate.
But it's like the Confederate soldiers are like greeting Annabeth, who's from Virginia. So like, oh yeah. And then they see Percy Jackson. Oh, your last name's Jackson, eh? Like the Civil War general. But you're from New York. You're a Yankee. And I'm just thinking in my brain, Rick Riordan actually had to write this, and he thought this would be really funny to put. And it's like of the 40-year-old mind when he wrote this.
I imagine there were several people with the last name Jackson who were involved in the Civil War. So imagining these soldiers assuming right away, oh, you must be related to Stonewall Jackson. Would they assume that, or would they be like, oh, that's just a normal surname that people have?
They don't know of the time, so they could imagine he could be a descendant. Because remember, Clarisse knows them, so for all they know is he's a high profile VIP, very important Percy Jackson.
Yep. Yeah, I guess I could kind of see that. It's just a funny thing that he wedges in there. I like how Tyson is immediately horrified, which I mean I would, because I think Confederates and skeletons
that's
are
totally our personality. You'd be horrified. I'd be like, oh my god, look at all these spooky skeletons.
They're skeleton ghosts. I keep thinking of that scene in James and the Giant Peach when they accidentally end up, spoiler alert I guess for the Henry Selick James and the Giant Peach movie, but when they the navigation gets messed up and they end up in the Arctic somewhere, and there's a sunken pirate ship and a bunch of spooky skeleton pirates.
Oh, and then Jack Skellington, but not really Jack Skellington's there.
Yeah, it's Jack. It basically looks exactly like Jack Skellington, but with a captain's hat on.
Yeah, and then the centipede fights him, and they think he's dead, and he comes back dressed as an El Capitan.
Yeah, kind of reminiscent of that a little bit.
And they get the gigantic compass and they fly all the way back. I just remember my favorite part about that is when they're in the Arctic and all the seagulls are frozen solid, but they're still flying.
Yeah, and they're their wings are all crunchy. Yeah, anyway, it's reminiscent of that a little bit.
Well, it's the idea of having the swashbuckler, or having they need to get to point A to point B. And this is a perfect way of doing it. It's actually a very beautiful set piece.
Well, it's not the perfect way. It's not the best. And, I don't think the Confederate soldiers are super, stoked about helping Clarisse, but they kind of have to because it's a curse that they have to help her.
B, you gotta kind of think of it this way, and having, they could have just been on, the lifeboat, and they had to go through the Sea of Monsters. This makes for, a very interesting set piece to have, both for the imagination, but also it's hey, the whole situation of Charybdis and Scylla it's a rock between a hard place. So you have this situation where you get to have, not only do you have red shirts, which are the Confederate soldiers, as you see what happens when they go too close to one side to the other, and you have all these situations happening. It's the idea of you can have characters that can die, but you don't feel bad when they die. But that's kind of the idea of it. If you think about it, B, if you're writing, I'm always looking at it as in format of Rick Riordan writing this, sitting down and actually, thinking and putting this set piece together, and that is, hey, we're going to have this cool Civil War ship, and we're going to go through this terrible situation. And I think that's more interesting than just having, oh no, we're on our little lifeboat, and we have no way of doing things because there's no danger. I guess there is danger to that, but with here, it's, once we get into it, I guess when we talk about Charybdis and Scylla, we looked up different pronunciations, so if we get it wrong, I'm sorry.
It's ancient Greek, again, pronunciation.
But it's the idea of having the rock in the hard place. Not only that, but the boat, they make explicitly, Tyson says the ship isn't meant for open water, so you have 3 elements of danger of, if you go too far to the right, you'll die, you go too far to the left, you'll die, but if we keep going forward, we have a chance of our boat exploding and we'll all die.
Yeah, so it's the choices are A, die, B, die, C, die, and D, all of the above.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting elements of this, but my favorite thing about this, though, is they go down to the captain's quarters, and they have the most, prestigious captain's meal of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, chips, and Dr. Pepper. Like, the way I'm imagining this is that they have, like, the really fancy meal of, like, I always forget the name of those things, like the tray with the gigantic, like, silver dome on it.
Oh yeah, I guess a cloche, technically.
The cloche, but they bring it out and then, like, they open it up and there's just sandwiches, chips, and Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, that would like really bum me out if that's like after all of the stuff that Percy and friends have been through, they just get like Dr. Pepper and chips and peanut butter and jelly. Like it's like the least sustaining type of food ever. Like I don't feel like that would be very satiating as far as a meal goes. But Clarisse seems to be pretty hype about the spread going on.
The way you're looking at it is it's kids' food. That's the best way to put it. I love peanut butter and jelly and Dr. Pepper, so I'll be like, oh my God, this is amazing. But to a kid, this is a feast. This isn't like, oh my God, like they're going to have like roast boar or they're going to have something that's actually fancy and nourishing. It's to a kid, this is their diet. This is what they love. This is what Rick Arden thinks that the kids love. This is what they're in the know.
The kids love. I mean, like when I was a kid, I also liked real food. I imagine like pizza or something would be more like something that kids would like that's like actual food. Like peanut butter and jelly, not the best lunch. You know what I mean? Like kids who brought peanut butter and jelly.
When it comes to like food in books, there's a lot of ways you can do it. I always think of like the high fantasy route of having like George R.R. Martin or kind of having like J.R.R. Tolkien or having any person that wants to describe food in like nauseating detail. Or you can have just, hey, they just have chips, they have sandwiches, and they have soda.
Yeah, I definitely get we've talked about this before, like the sense that Rick Riordan is like has taught children before, and like this is his like mind's eye idea of like what children would like to eat, like what 12-year-olds and thereabouts, they're like really stoked to just eat a bunch of sugar, which I guess is some kids. I feel like that might be a bit of a stereotype because I think kids also like real food to some extent.
Like we can easily talk about this, like the food in Percy Jackson. I'm surprised, is there a Percy Jackson cookbook? Because I know Harry Potter has one, Bob's Burgers has one, there's a Twin Peaks one.
I have the Hunger Games cookbook, which in retrospect is kind of terrible to think about in a way because everyone's hungry in the Hunger Games.
You know, when the first time I heard about the Hunger Games, I thought that was an entire book about a hunger strike.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. I mean, it's like hearing about the chocolate war and me just like envisioning people throwing chocolate at each other.
It kind of like reminds me of the book I Am Cheese. I'm just imagining a person that turns into like a gigantic like cheese block.
Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I find that food in kids' books, this is definitely true of like stuff like Goosebumps too, where any kind of like characterization of a kid, they'll always like immediately want just like sugary garbage, whatever. Like they don't ever want real food, and I think that it's kind of like a bit of a stereotype that isn't super accurate all the time. I mean, they're definitely kids like that, but I don't know. Like they're not that young. They're not like 8-year-olds. They're whatever. How old are they now? 13, 12? Going on like this intense quest. I would imagine you'd want like something more nourishing than a PB&J. That's just my opinion. I think it's a little bit like, it's kind of a joke that they say that, but I'm
sure there's like scientific studies about this, but it's like the idea of like a kid left to his own device, what would he eat? And it's like, I just imagine Percy's like, Annabeth, we're going to have candy for dinner. And Annabeth's like, that's impossible. We can't do that. Wait, we can?
I mean, you have candy for dinner once and then never again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's called Halloween.
You have candy for dinner and then you have regret for breakfast the next day.
Yeah, it's a little bit of humble pie afterwards. But it's like the idea of like Clarisse coming down, like smacking it hard with like kale chips and like, I don't even know, like lean cuisine.
That would also be funny if she was just like really into like health, or she was on the keto diet or something.
No, all that they have is protein shakes. And the Atkins diet.
That's another thing too, right? Because like Clarisse is kind of like intense and very like physical, and you would think that in a way she would be like really concerned with training, so she would just eat like you said, like protein shakes or something, or like be like a health nut. It's just kind of funny.
In my honest opinion for Clarisse, I think she's on the Ron Swanson diet of just meat, protein, bacon. I think the built-in defense for this is, do you really, really want dead Confederates feeding you actual prepared food rather than pre-made food?
Oh, I guess, yeah. They're making it. Oh, yeah. Well, that's kind of gross to think about when you really stop for a second and consider the implications. I'd be so icked out, actually, if I was surrounded by dead people. I don't even really think about that, like the actual logistics of being surrounded by, like, decaying humans who are reanimated. That'd be kind of a gross situation.
Like, that's like the charm of Percy Jackson. You can have like a centerpiece like this of having like peanut butter and jelly, chips, Dr. Pepper, with a bunch of dead Confederate zombies. And then they switch the conversation. Annabeth's kind of explaining what's been happening. You know, we have to go to the Sea of Monsters. We have to find the Golden Fleece before Luke does because he knows the location. But Clarisse is like, man, Tantalus has like banned you from the camp, and Dionysus has all-seeing power. We'll turn them into squirrels and hit them with his SUV. Except Clarisse is more worried about, hey, this is my quest. I don't want you guys mucking about on my quest because I've been gone through all the proper channels.
Again, another very juvenile thing, because I guess it's trying to remind you a little bit about how young these characters are. Like, it's like the dibs kind of mentality of like, oh, well, this is my quest, so you're not allowed to kind of glom onto my quest and steal it from me.
Yes, the ancient order of dibs.
Yeah, exactly. So it's you know, calling shotgun and being like, oh, well, you can't take it now, it's mine.
It gives Clarisse an actual character because, you know, she's gone through the proper channels. This is her big moment to actually make everyone proud at the camp. And here you have the titular character. I'm going to do the whole quest again. I've already had my shot last year. This is my chance to shine again. And Clarisse is like, no, I'm not letting you do this. This is my shot. This is my shot at glory.
Yeah, we definitely get a sense of Clarisse's incredibly toxic dynamic with her father Ares in this, like the specific mindset that the Ares cabin is imbued with, like this idea of like conquering and defeating and being the best at everything. And also obviously her dad is like, he's the god of war, he's very overbearing, and he's not like violent towards her, but he has like an aggressive personality.
I'm going to actually have to disagree with you with that because there's a passage in this chapter where Ares kind of like raises his fist up and Clarisse flinches, meaning that he's not prone to beating his kids.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I wouldn't put it past him to do something like that, but yeah, there's like the sense that she's like duty bound to him, and it's not really like a normal father-child relationship, as we've talked about with these gods. That's not how it works. And she's like sort of, she wants to impress him, she wants to fulfill like a certain obligation to him in a way that's like very unhealthy. And she has like also this idea of like what it means to be a hero and wanting to like fulfill that. And then I think that's why she sees Percy as such a threat, because he's like already gotten this like hero title in, you know, he came back to great uproar the year before, like he did all this stuff, and in doing so he also defeated her dad. Percy had like this battle at the beach in California against him, so it's like sort of this already contentious thing, and then also he's like stealing the spotlight from her, stealing like this glory that she is jealous of.
The most interesting thing I found with this chapter as well is, whereas Poseidon didn't really help Percy in very minor things, Ares the exact opposite and gave Clarisse a boat. It's a bunch of dead people, and she's going all by herself. She doesn't have any friends to go with her. She's going to do this all by herself. She's going to give it the old college try, almost.
Yeah, well, he's like overbearing almost, because he's directing her.
Yeah, no, he's more like an Apache attack helicopter parent.
We actually get to see them interact for the first time in this chapter, where like Percy, he wakes up from his, we'll talk about the insane kind of, it's not really a dream, but it's whatever, his vision of Grover and everything happening with the Cyclopses and stuff.
Oh, you mean the rom-com happening?
Yeah, sort of, a little bit like a rom-com situation. And when Percy wakes up, he like is jolted awake and then immediately realizes what's surrounding him is also terrible, because Percy like oversees Clarisse and Ares having like this very tense conversation.
Which is interesting because we have the dynamic between Percy and his dad, and now we have Ares with Clarisse, and how Ares is more direct with his kids rather than Poseidon, who is like so indirect that it's like he shouldn't even be, like he's never there. He helps in certain ways in spirit, rather than the god of war. You have to always be boots on the ground almost type of mentality of, these are my kids. And he has a lot of kids too. And he's also like, he wasn't even going to give this quest to Clarisse. He's like, I could have given it to one of the boys, but I'm giving it to you.
Yeah, there's also that weird sexism thing, which I guess kind of makes sense for a character like Ares, who kind of has this like chauvinist personality, which is just all the more reason why Clarisse feels like she needs to like impress him somehow or, you know, live up to this expectation.
Which I think is important to have in a character because you actually humanize Clarisse because you give her reasons for why she is who she is. And here you actually get to see the most important thing for a character, which I consider to be the most important thing when you write a character, is showing their vulnerability. I think when you have a character that is almost indestructible, it is a boring character. Examples, Superman. Yes, he has the Clark Kent aspect of it, but you can never really hurt Superman, even with kryptonite. Like, they've already proved it with the death of Superman that you can kill Superman, but, oh, he's not really dead. But then you have characters like Batman or Spider-Man, or you have other superheroes, even Captain America. They're people that have powers, but they also have all these problems in their lives that either are solved or they're not. And I think that's the most important thing with Clarisse, is when you have a character that's very strong, super like uppity up, and just very like, I'm in charge, this is who I am. But then you realize that, oh yeah, they're also people, like they're actually written in a way that actually makes them human. I think that's the most important thing. And I think that's the great thing about Rick Riordan, is every character has a motivation and everyone has at least one chance to shine throughout the series.
Yeah, they have like complicated emotions going on. And you can really see that in Clarisse. Like she's cruel to Percy and friends in some ways, like she's very abrasive in her personality, but I don't think she's as, I guess, callous as her dad. Like he just like powers through whatever he wants, he gets what he wants kind of thing. Well, like I think she does
Well, that's because he's a god and no one's ever told him no.
Yeah, that's true too. He definitely has a different sense of power and what he's owed in the world, so he's just like, oh, well, I get what I want. Well, Clarisse definitely, she has like this weird personality where I can't fully admonish her and say, oh, she's like this terrible character who's so mean to them, because you can tell that she doesn't, you know, want to just abandon them. She doesn't just leave them in the middle of the water when she shows up with the boat. She doesn't even listen to Ares fully when he's, you know, saying stuff. We find out a little bit about how there's something to do with the Oracle, and it's hinted that Percy's somehow involved in the Oracle in completing this quest, and she wants him to be involved or thinks he should be involved. But Ares is like pushing back on that and saying that it should just be her.
Yeah, and that's the idea of like she's defying fate. She's like tempting fate in this way of having, I'm not going to listen to what the Oracle says. I'm going to do everything like the Frank Sinatra way of it's going to be my way.
Yeah. Frank Sinatra way. Yeah, and you know that it's not going to work out because that's like how oracles are. They know everything's kind of predestined, but in a way that you don't realize yet. But clearly this oracle, which we haven't heard, we don't know the like specifics of what's going on. They're not going about it the right way. They're not following the path that's supposed to happen.
No, and as we see now, is that the great terror is about to happen, but we're going to kind of like move back a little bit and kind of talk about a little bit of the rom-com, you know, the sheep romance they have with Grover.
Oh yeah, God, that whole weird dynamic. All of these dream sequences are, I mean, they're not dream sequences because they're technically actually happening, but like he's dreaming because he's asleep.
It's more like Percy has like an astral projection of himself and he's actually witnessing it.
These are weird like vignettes, I guess, because there's just something about how they're very serious in a way because it's like the big plot of them. They need to save Grover. They need to get this fleece. Like all of that stuff is really intrinsic to the plot. It's not just like a random sidebar, but it's also funny. There's a lot of like slapsticky kind of funny things. The fact that Grover is like in this wedding dress trying to trick a Cyclops that he's a Cyclops. You're seeing like all of this weird like goat sheep like enthusiasm with all of these like figurines and stuff and like bones from satyrs.
What I meant by when it was kind of being like a rom-com is this is a typical example of like a sitcom and having an A story and a B story. The A story obviously being Percy Jackson, and this is the B story, and having how does Grover trick Polytheseus to like, I need more days. Man, this bridal train, it's not coming along well. And he has his things. It's almost a lot like The Odd Couple a little bit, and having Grover has one plan and Polytheseus has another.
Yeah, it's such a weird tone, I guess, especially of these like astral projection, vision, whatever you want to call them, scenes, because you know that there's like a lot on the line. You know that Grover could basically be eaten at any moment and found out that he's intentionally unraveling this bridal train, and like the golden fleece is right there, and that's what they need. That's the whole point of the quest, but he can't help Percy in any way because he's too busy like keeping up this weird charade with the Cyclops. It's a lot going on, but they play a lot of stuff for laughs too, because of just like the absurdity of the situation of him in this wedding dress and like pretending to be this role. So it's like hard to, I don't know, there's like tension and then there's not tension because they're joking about it.
My favorite aspects of this, again, is it's very situational comedy and having, Grover's in this bridal dress and he's like, oh yeah, it's just the goat perfume. And the Cyclops is like, oh yeah, I have the golden fleece. I use it to catch satyrs because they're so yummy wummy. And it's really funny, except my favorite parts about this is, he's like undoing the bridal train and the Cyclops catches him and he's like, what are you doing? And, oh, I'm just redoing this. And he's like, it's okay. You're terrible at like knitting and doing whatever it is. Here, I'm going to help you. Like he's an idiot in the best sense of being like, oh, he's not stalling for time. He's just terrible at doing what he's doing. And they look at the golden fleece and he gets some special yarn. It's like, oh yeah, this will not come undone whatever you do. You only have a day to do all this. So now we only have one day to actually complete this quest. And they're just about to reach the Sea of Monsters, except Grover knows that, Percy's listening. So he asks him, oh, honey bunch, what if someone was to come in and invade and get the fleece? What would happen? And Polytheseus is like, oh yeah, I have a top class security system. And he like looks out and there's just sheep and nothing.
Through my pets, whatever that means.
Whatever that means. And then he has to go through me. And I think that's really great of having like, hey, we get to get some exposition, but also be humorous about it.
Yeah, we get the setup about what's going to happen once they finally arrive at their destination. The dialogue's really funny, like seeing Grover try to keep up this whole act and just the way he's like, oh, what if they invade? Like he kind of keeps slipping up, but because the Cyclops is so like oblivious and kind of dumb that he doesn't really get what's going on.
Yeah, which I think is very funny because again, that's very like situational comedy of you have a character that's smarter than the other person. And it's like how both of them are smart in their own ways, but that's what makes the comedy of that. Hey, we can do one thing and then the person's reaction is a completely opposite thing of what you think is going to happen. It reminds me a lot of Pee-wee's Big Adventure when they have the part where Pee-wee gets into the convertible with the convicted felon and they're driving. And the joke is that we have to get through this barricade. So Pee-wee dresses up as a girl and the guy dresses up as a more gruff man. And they get through the security thing. And the whole comedy with this whole situation is the serial killer is just like, I'm a bad guy, but Pee-wee sees that he's a good guy, and he lets him go in the end because he almost die.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's very dangerous ground to be treading when you have characters cross-dressing for comedy.
As long as it's not a joke that's at the expense of another person, it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Like, as long as they're not like, isn't it funny that he's a girl? I think it's more funny that the Cyclops is like in love with this satyr that he doesn't realize is a satyr and he wants to eat them. Like the comedy comes from there. It doesn't like not great that they're being like, oh, isn't it funny that he's in a dress? Like that's a little questionable in my opinion, but it's not like to the point where I would feel like it's trying to like make that joke like, oh, the entire joke is a man is wearing a dress, because that like gets into some bad messaging that you're sending to people.
The way I'm looking at this is it's not harmful. Like even like we can look at like Mulan and you can do things like in drag or do things tastefully. There are plenty of like situations where it's good. Yeah, I mean there's like situations where I'm like looking at this, how this could have been badly written, and I'm thinking of like Polyphemus like gives Grover a kiss and he's like, oh man, you have this a scruffy facial hair, like stupid things like that would have been terrible.
Yeah, it could have really been bad, but I think the humor comes from the fact that he's like keeping up this sort of charade. I mean, it like you mentioned Mulan, and it's a similar thing too of like, Mulan like putting on like the voice and kind of being like, oh yes, right, yeah, I'm gonna go and totally climb that pole. I do think also I'm willing to give someone like Rick Riordan the benefit of the doubt. I know later on he has like trans characters and has trans representation, and he wants to like do good by that, and I think like that's how you like build, I guess, goodwill between you and your readers, is like you can talk about like maybe like a complicated situation that could be like offensive if you do it the wrong way, because you actually end up talking about like issues related to that as well. Like if you just use like gender nonconformity as a joke, then that's like uncomfortable. But if you also allow that to be like a part of your protagonist, like I know that later on, not in Percy Jackson, but in a different series, he has that.
Here, I'll give it a perfect example of a way that it's done tastefully is in Series of Unfortunate Events, there's Coach Genghis, who in the book is supposed to be this gigantic racist nightmare of like stereotypes, like down to like, I'm pretty sure Count Olaf is pretty much in like blackface at that point.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Netflix series, Neil Patrick Harris made a conscious decision to sound like Dr. Phil.
To like not do that voice. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's you can have someone in a costume, I guess, but like don't have them be doing like a voice or something, or I don't know. I mean, even Grover is speaking in like a higher pitched voice, but that's kind of like what he's doing to like fool. I don't know. It's a complicated thing. I don't know if I have like a hard and fast rule about like when it's okay and when it's like not great. Yeah, I don't know. I've just been thinking about that. It's kind of an interesting tone that it strikes when you see these dream sequences, because it's also supposed to be like raising the tension, because you know that the closer it gets to him getting married or whatever to this Cyclops, the more time is running out for Percy. So you're like worried, but also it's supposed to be funny. It's an interesting kind of thing that they're trying to strike.
This is a very George Lucas thing. It's having the clock and now having you only have one day to actually do what you have to do. And that is Percy has to rescue Grover.
Oh yeah, the countdown thing is something Rick Riordan loves too. Like he loves to have a very specific, like, this is your deadline. You have to do the thing within this amount of time.
Well, there's a specific reason for that, why he likes that, and that is you have tension, you know that there's going to be a day, so that makes kids read faster or wants to read the book more because they want to know what happens, because in most books, let's look at a book like To Kill a Mockingbird, not a lot happens in that book. If you added, oh, hey, like, there's going to be the execution on this day, all of a sudden you're very like, I got to keep reading until it gets to that particular day.
Yeah, there's a specific contextualization of the drama too. Yeah, because if otherwise, like, you have no idea how long this quest is taking, or it doesn't really like give you an idea of how long they have to complete what they're completing. If they don't have a deadline, then it could just kind of go on forever and they could keep trying until they succeed. Having like this cutoff, like, oh, they need to save Grover, there isn't just like, they can't just spin their wheels forever and then eventually make their way to the Golden Fleece. Because then you also have the deadline of the dying tree too. Like, is it going to completely die and then be like unrevivable even by the Golden Fleece?
This is also a great way of reflecting, between a rock and a hard place. Kind of the core theme of this chapter is there's so many different situations happening all at once. They just have to keep moving forward and pray to the gods that they will get to where they need to go. Which after that happens, all Hades breaks loose. They hear a warning bell and they go up top and they realize that they've approached the mouth of the Sea of Monsters.
Yeah, and then this is also where we see some of like Clarisse's hard-headedness, which I guess is like also compounded by the fact she just got finished speaking with her dad, so she's like has this like newfound like motivation to try and succeed, and she's kind of maybe like full steam ahead in moments where she shouldn't be full steam ahead, and that's like Tyson popping up and saying, oh, I can hear that the engines are straining in this type of water, it's not working this way, and then her like insisting that they need to like enter the Sea of Monsters right in between these two monstrous creatures that are going to threaten their safety, because like that's where she wants to go, and she's like, oh, well, we'll just use our celestial bronze cannonballs and blow everything up, and like that's basically her plan, is to just explode things until she gets her way, which is a very Ares thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like the idea of like might versus like insight almost. Because they know the situation, because it's already been done before with Odysseus, it's already been done with Jason, it's been done with all these people, and this is how you're supposed to do it, except Clarisse's idea is just blow everything up, fire all cannons.
Yeah, she just kind of has like no perspective, I guess, and even like Annabeth is like, oh, there's other ways to enter the Sea of Monsters, why don't you do that? But she doesn't want to even entertain other options. She's like, oh, well, I can't explode rock with my cannons, but I sure can explode monsters, so let's go.
So then they start to go full speed ahead. And this is where all the problems happen because there's Charybdis, which is like a gigantic mouth of horrors.
Mouth creature, yeah, it has braces, which is an interesting detail that he added.
That's just that's such a kid's thing of like the scariest thing you can think of is braces.
There's like food stuck in gross braces, which I mean, I did experience that in high school. I didn't have braces, but I knew someone who did, who like did not do a good job of flossing, and it was a bad time seeing that person smile. Oh God, I feel like I imagine my sister listening to this and cringing, like, ugh.
And then you have Cilia, which is just a gigantic cave where this creature comes out and like starts snatching people if you get too close to it.
Yeah, it's like a reptilian, like, feelers. I don't exactly. The description is.
Yeah, I just think of like a gigantic, like, spooky hand just pops out and like just goes yoink.
Yeah, and apparently it happens so fast that you can't even like catch it. It's like a laser beam, Percy describes it as.
This is where we also get the saying, a rock between a hard place. This is actually where it comes from.
Is that true?
Yeah, this is where it comes from. Because if you go too far to the right, you're screwed. If you go too far to the left, you're screwed. But you have to always keep going dead center. You have a hard obstacle.
Oh yeah, a metaphor for dilemma in Greek mythology. So yeah, you're right. That is where a rock and a hard place comes from.
B, do you want to know what my favorite version of a rock and a hard place is?
What is your favorite version of a rock and a hard place?
In the movie The Polar Express, when they're on the frozen lake, and the weight of the train is cracking the ice, and they have to keep going forward on the ice. And as they're going through the frozen lake, they realize that they're not on the tracks anymore, and they have a very, very narrow window, and they can't slow down, or they'll be engulfed by the ice, and they'll all drown. So they have to keep going forward and trying interesting techniques of making sure that they can't go too far to the left, they can't go too far to the right. They have to power on and go forward until they reach the train tracks, hopefully, and not get derailed.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's just it's a really common dramatic device to put someone in a dilemma, like, oh, you have to pick between these kind of two horrible things, and you have to find a way to avoid both of them somehow.
Oh yeah, and then there's like terrible ways. Like, did you ever watch The Amazing Spider-Man?
No, I didn't watch that.
Every bad movie has, I would consider, a good scene in it if you watch it. And the rock and the hard place of that one is near the end of that movie, the lizard's going to do his plan. He's going to turn the whole world into lizards. Spider-Man has been injured. Yes, this happens. Spider-Man has been injured, and he doesn't have enough web fluid to get to the building where the lizard's going to do this whole situation. He does not have any way.
Also, I didn't know Spider-Man could run out of web.
Most Spider-Man things, it's actually like a fluid that he has. Like, it's not an actual organic thing.
Well, that's kind of disappointing.
So Spider-Man, like, he sees the building, but he doesn't have enough, like, web fluid, and he's also injured to actually make it to the building. And what happens is there's actually a setup. In the beginning of the movie, he saves a crane operator's daughter. And this crane operator sees Spider-Man, and he calls his friends, and all of his friends swing all their cranes so he can jump across to get to the building. It's so stupid that I had to talk about it. And it's bringing tears to my eyes because of thinking of a writer actually writing it. And that's a definition of a rock and a hard place.
Yeah. And the lesson is you gotta make friends with crane operators, I guess.
No, because he saved the crane operator's daughter, and he sees Spider-Man's in trouble, so he calls up all of his friends. So they all hop on their cranes. So they swing all their cranes to make, like, that's so stupid. But yeah. Like, I'm actually getting tears right now because of how it hurts to think about.
Of how weird it is. Yeah, I didn't see that movie. It's like a really bad situation, and then Annabeth, like, suggests a few alternatives, and, like, obviously Clarisse is gonna listen to her, and then, of course, Tyson, because he knows about engines, I guess, he knows about mechanical things, he's like, pression, pistons need fixing, like, whatever, he knows that the engine's gonna, like, explode.
That's the most interesting thing about Tyson, is that he's the only one that can do the job. Even though everyone has considered him like an idiot or very slow, this is his moment to shine, and he is the smartest person in the situation now.
Yeah, I liked that. I like that he has this ability to help them, because I do think that he gets underestimated a lot as, like, oh, he's just like the brawn of the situation, like, oh, because he's big that he could fight people, but he actually understands engines really well.
Yeah, because that's how he's wired in this world. Like, he's really good at understanding how machinery works. He doesn't have like quite a good grasp on like human interaction, but he can talk to a machine as if it's like a keynote speech. Hi, I'm Tyson. This is my TED Talk with his engine. But it's like the idea, it's almost like sentimentality of this is where the melodrama comes in. This is where like the red light fades in the spotlight. No, Tyson, I can't let you do this. Heavens to Betsy, Percy says.
Yeah. So basically we find out that like all of the friggin' skeletons are just like dissolving as soon as they go into the engine room. So Tyson, of course, volunteers to like help, and he's like resistant to fire because he's a friggin' Cyclops and they have magical resistance.
Well, I mean, it's also the very schmaltzy thing of having, this is very melodramatic. Like, this is, I would call this prime melodrama of having, he's going to die in there, he's going to burn to death. And, you know, we know Tyson's impervious to fire. But Percy's like, I have to go down there and help. And Annabelle's like, but you'll be vaporized if you do it. I have to take that chance. And just as that's about to happen, like he's going to run down into the machine room, he gets picked up by Syllabus.
So I don't think it's Syllabus.
That's a spooky thing in high school and college. Woo!
Syllabuses are scary. That not the monster, but
Oh, Silius.
Silius, yeah, I think so.
So he gets picked up by Silius, which is not your syllabus. You have this due date. Ooh. But he's like picked up into the air. He's going to be eaten by this creature. Percy uncaps Riptide, is able to like chop at it, and he falls. As he's free falling, the whole ship explodes. Just enough time that all the lifeboats are deployed, and Percy falls into the water, and he says the most horrific thing. The last thing I remember was sinking into the burning sea, knowing that Tyson was gone forever, and wishing I were able to drown.
Yeah, oh god, it's so dark.
You know, a kid's book for kids.
Yeah, for children, for youngins. Yeah, it's really very bad. The thing is, I didn't really have as much of a sense of drama in the scene, probably because of the melodrama. Like you said, it was just like so like beat for beat exactly what you would expect. Like, oh, don't do the dangerous thing. Oh, you're going to redeem yourself because whatever, Annabeth doesn't like you and other people like are prejudiced against you. So you're going to like sacrifice yourself. Like that whole setup was like so expected for me. But also I just don't think that Tyson died. I don't know if that's true or not. You can't tell me. I know you can't tell me. But there's just like, you know, we know he's resistant to fire. I feel like that would just be like not a great way to end his character. Because even though that it like follows the sort of redemption arc of him proving himself, I don't think it does justice to his character enough. He doesn't really like get enough agency in the story. We only met him in this book. And for him to like die, you know, in chapter 11 seems a little bit like, I don't know.
Very schmaltzy and kind of very melodramatic.
Yeah, it seems kind of silly or something, and like maybe kind of unfair to his character if he were to actually be like dead forever. That's my opinion, but I could be wrong.
Now here's my response, and this is a very like Patrick Rothfuss response of he's going to answer the question but not say anything. Having the death of a character, even like a kid, killing kids is pretty extreme in most media. Like, if you do that, you're automatically going to get an X rating, or the most is a very hard R. And especially like, even like there's like historical stuff, and just seeing dead kids is a horrific thing, especially in kids' books.
It might be a little different with the Cyclops because he's like a monster, which is kind of a messed up thing when you think about it, right? Like he's technically has like the same cogent thought process of a human, but he is a monster technically, and like we've seen monsters die before and they just kind of disintegrate and whatever. There has been deaths of monsters, just not of children monsters who we also know and are like endeared to because he's the brother or half brother of the main character.
Oh no, but remember Percy Jackson says, but Tyson, you're my brother. And then that's when like the music would swell and you would see a single tear roll down Tyson's one eye.
Yeah, one giant tear from his one eye.
Like, I'm imagining the scene now in my brain as a movie, and you just see this happening. Like, Tyson's, like, walking down the steps, and all the music's swelling, and you see, like, Tyson's clothes just start catching on fire, and you just see him engulfed in flames, and then that's it. Like, you don't see what the outcome of what's about to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would feel like a real jerk if I'm wrong and he did die and I'm not, like, reacting the right way, but I think I'm just, like, I'm jaded, and I feel like the tone was weird, and if this were to be his actual death, I would be like kind of annoyed at Rick Riordan for like not doing justice to his character and like not really fulfilling his arc in a way that like was like meaningful and not kind of like silly. Would a kid like assume that Tyson actually died in this scenario? Because I just can't possibly imagine.
Like I said, I'm not going to tell you what's happening, except you have to think of it this way, B. Killing a kid, no matter what you do in any society, it's very frowned upon, to the point of where if you're writing a book for kids, even if it's a monster, but you've grown attached to them and they've made it explicit that he is a kid, that is, a kid is reading this, and most kids don't die in books because they're the main heroes, and kids don't die in books. So to have a character die is a very big deal. Especially like killing superheroes off is a very big deal. Even though they'll come back, it's a very big deal.
Yeah, that's just like my perspective on the situation. I don't know if like that kind of ruins the drama of it, and also like maybe just the way that it was written, like we said, is like almost like over the top dramatic to the point where like I can't take it seriously, even if it were to be like definitely like, oh, Tyson's dead now or whatever. But
did you want like Rick Riordan's reaction to be that you're reading this book and then you pass out and then your partner has to come in with like the smelling salts? Like, this is, oh no, this is too heavy.
It's like, oh, it's so sad. Like, because, you know, there is that thing in children's books where sometimes they do kill off characters and it's very, like, sad and heartbreaking. And I've, like, obviously had that experience, like, reading Unfortunate Events, for example, or, like, I guess even something like Harry Potter, though I didn't read the books long enough to get to the part where all, like, everybody starts to die, including Hedwig and, like, a bunch of people.
You know who I felt the most emotion for dying was B? In Series of Unfortunate Events?
Was it Olaf?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not because I liked him as a character, but because you learn so much about him that it's almost a crime to kill him rather than him being punished for his crime. Yeah, it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
I don't like Olaf because he's a very vile man, but it's like the idea of killing a character.
Like, you can kill a character suddenly and for it to be like a meaningful story thing. I keep using Unfortunate Events as an example because there's so many like deaths in those books, but like the Uncle Monty death is like something I think of in a children's book that's like, that was really affecting to me as a kid because it felt like real. Like I knew that there were stakes and I believed that Monty was dead, sort of, but because also I think they don't live in a magical world too. It's a different universe, so I think there's also that. So I think maybe.
But B, you gotta remember, in the reptile room, they explicitly say in the beginning of the book about dramatic irony.
Yeah.
They specifically state that Monty will die.
They explain dramatic irony. Yeah, that's true. They do. They tell you. So I think that it really depends on the universe you're like working within. It might be harder for Rick Riordan to write like a meaningful death that feels like it has stakes because we live, or like we're inhabiting this world where you can think that Percy's mom died and then he goes to the underworld and saves her. You know, the line between dead and alive is blurred. They're literally surrounded by reanimated corpses fighting these monsters. Like there isn't a finality to death that is in the same way to something, you know, like a book that doesn't take place in like a magical world.
Yeah, so you can also use the argument again. We can actually talk about this. Superhero deaths are the exact same way. There are no stakes to them because you know they're going to come back no matter what you do. The prime example of this is the death of Superman. The reason why that comic sold so well, it sold, I think, actually 1 million copies, which is unheard of for a comic book, was because you are killing Superman. Then a year or two later, they brought him right back. And now you've set a precedent of having, you can kill any superhero you want. They can come back now, no matter what you do.
Yeah, exactly. It like removes a little bit of the like dramatic tension. And I think that might be like, I don't know, just a specific genre thing that you kind of can't escape if you're going to like inhabit the kind of world where you can visit the underworld and then find someone there. Like, you can't write about something like that without having some demystifying of the whole process of death, and like the finality of that isn't real here. You can't think of it that way because they're demigods and they're gods and they're cyclopses. They're not humans, so it's just different.
The hardest part about writing deaths is it justified? Like, that's kind of the thing of like having like a character that you love and you just want to see live, and they die. There's like so many ones I want to give, but they're kind of like spoilery.
Yeah, that's true. Most deaths are pretty spoilery if you talk about them.
I guess here's an example I actually really enjoy is in Star Wars when Obi-Wan Kenobi is fighting Darth Vader and Obi-Wan decides, I'm going to sacrifice myself so Luke Skywalker and the gang get on the Millennium Falcon and leave. And he gives himself to the Force. That's why he disappears into his robes. It's because he is at peace now, and he knows that whatever he's about to do, he's putting blind faith into Luke Skywalker. So when you see him die and you see Luke Skywalker like, go, Ben, no! There's actually like stakes to this because you see the result of it rather than like having gunshot fade to black.
I do think that the way that it's written also contributes to that. I would be like really annoyed if this was actually Tyson's death because I feel like there's so much about his character that isn't really resolved, and like not in a way that like makes it sadder, because obviously you can write a death where, you know, your character didn't get everything they wanted or they didn't resolve every conflict, but there needs to be like some, I guess, narrative justification for that. But because, I don't know, this just doesn't seem like the kind of sacrifice that makes sense for him to die in, because it's like not the right part in the book too, I think, because it's not like it's both too late in the story and too early for it to be like, for me to believe major character deaths, I guess.
Here, I can tell you an example of like a death that's effective that's halfway through a story, and that is in Gears of War. Your main character is Marcus Phoenix and Dominic Santiago. Dom's been looking for his wife for 15 years. In the second game, he finds her. She's been tortured, and he has to put her down because she's a husk of a person. It's like one of the most dramatic scenes I've ever seen in a video game. In Gears of War 3, halfway through that game, Dom dies, and the whole rest of that game is just you play as Marcus, and he's just stewing, and he's angry. He can't grieve because he has to find his dad. And there's a part in the game where he just snaps, and it's almost satisfying. There's some ways that it can be shocking. There's like, you know, you hold your cards close to your chest, and it works. Whereas other times it doesn't quite work when you have that because there can always be the fake reveal. But it's very similar. Actually, in Gears of War, Dom blows up in almost a very similar fashion.
An explosion. Explosion deaths, too, I think are something that you can't do, like, well, you can do it in an emotionally meaningful way, but because it's like so bombastic and ridiculous, like it's kind of hard for me also to like feel that sense of like mourning for a character, even if I'm not 100% sure he's actually dead or alive or whatever, because it's like he explodes. Like that's like funny to me almost. It's like cartoonish.
So here are the two ways this could happen. The first is you never find the body, or the second, you find the body as like a charred mess of a thing. The hardest thing about this, B, when it comes to like an explosion death, is the idea of hope. I feel like, you know, the hope of someone's going to be alive because you never found their body.
I think also that like presents like the nebulousness of someone's death too. If they die in such a way that it's like hard to recover their body, you don't like see their body lying there dying. You know what I mean? It's not like Tyson has a disease or something, or he gets shot and you see him fall on the ground.
It's not like the melodramatic thing of like someone's been shot or mortally wounded and the person's holding them in their arms as like they're gasping for the last ounce of like breath before they keel over and die. When it comes to like deaths, it's a very complicated thing because I don't know about you, B, but like death is like a very interesting topic regardless of whatever you talk about, because it's like the ultimate fear upon fears of everybody. And having like a character die it's either like it can be a cheap shot or be used very effectively.
Yeah, it's interesting. I keep thinking about like what demigods' relationship with death must be like. Like, how do they feel about that? I guess, do demigods go to the underworld when they die? Like, I don't exactly know how.
Oh yeah, they do.
Death works. So they go to the underworld and then they kind of get sorted into where they go after that, or
yeah,
that's kind of the situation.
Only people that have been able to cheat death has been the gods and Chiron.
Yeah. Chiron has, well, because he's like really old. Well, there's also creatures that could live a long time.
Remember, Chiron made a wish with the gods that he can stay alive as long as there's someone that needs his help. And that's why like he's like super afraid, because if he can't help anybody now, he'll fade and die.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like a lot of complicated world building going on surrounding like how death affects people, and it has like a different stakes and circumstances compared to like a book that doesn't have all of like this established world.
It also depends on like having characters like you're fully invested in as well, because if you're fully invested in a character, I'll give an example. I like to give examples for stuff. In Assassin's Creed 2, you see the birth of your character Ezio Auditore, And throughout all the games, you see him grow up to be a man, and then they have a little movie where you see him die. So you see a man's complete life. You've pretty much fallen in love with this character. He's one of the best well-written characters is Ezio.
I mean, but that's the thing. Like, you do like Tyson, and I do think that they've built enough like pathos to make you feel something if he were to die. He's not like one of the skeletons that he could just be vaporized, and you're like, oh, well, he's like a stormtrooper or whatever, and he could just get killed, and it doesn't matter. They're interchangeable, faceless, whatever characters. You do have, like, there's a lot of empathy going on with Tyson. He's probably one of the most empathetic characters in the book, even compared to Percy, because Percy's, like, a little bit of a know-it-all sometimes, or he's, like, whatever, or maybe not a know-it-all, but, like, kind of a brat or annoyed or whatever. But Tyson's just, like, pure sweetness. Like, he's just, like, he's a nice person. He wants to help people in every way. He's, like, very innocent. He loves, he meets the sea ponies and he, like, gives them a name and is like, oh, it's Rainbow, it's my best friend. Like, there's so much goodwill built towards this character. So it's, like, almost, like, gross to kill him also, because it's very, like, kicking the dog thing in a story to, like, take the sweetest, most innocent character. Or, like, I keep thinking of, examples like Breaking Bad, spoiler alert, like Gale Bedecker, like, he's gonna die because he's too nice.
Well, I mean, isn't it like it's the joke of having, it's like, well, I'm only 2 days to retirement and I haven't filled out the life insurance policy yet, or I'm 2 days fresh out of the academy and I'm starry-eyed and I want to conquer the world. And then they get their face blown off.
I just think, personally, if Tyson is officially dead, and I really don't think he is, but if he were to die this way, it just would be like, he doesn't get any kind of forward momentum with his storyline. He doesn't really get the redemption of having people accept him as a Cyclops and be kind to him, regardless of him being a quote-unquote monster or whatever. Annabeth hasn't really, like, atoned for the way that she's treated him. There's, like, all this stuff left unanswered in a way that, like, isn't just sad, it's, like, frustrating narratively. So I just hope that he's still alive, just for the sake of the story, because I think it doesn't work if he dies this way.
Maybe we'll find out. Maybe Tyson's alive. Maybe he's dead. Chances are he might be dead. He got bloated up. But B, what's the name of the next chapter?
Next chapter is chapter 12. We check in to Cece's spa and resort.
Yay! What do you think is going to happen next chapter?
I mean, Percy gets, like, we leave off with him falling down into the ocean again. We've this is deja vu. We've seen him falling down into the ocean before. We know he's not gonna drown. He can't. He mentioned it. He kind of can't.
Unless he wills himself to drown.
I don't think he's gonna do that. That would be incredibly dark. Is him intentionally drowning himself, and, like, that's the end of the story. But yeah, I imagine they're gonna find some way to have a boat. I feel like he's gonna immediately reunite with Annabeth and probably Clarisse or something. This might be, like, the sort of, like, winnowing down of, like, the extraneous characters, and then it's just gonna be, like, the three of them, and then them maybe trying to recover Tyson. I don't think Tyson's gonna immediately, like, pop up out of the waves, like, like a beach ball just floating to the surface, like, oh, he's alive. Like, I think there will be a little bit of tension about him returning, but I think he's gonna return probably in a moment of great need, like when they're, like, up against the rope, so to speak. He'll appear out of nowhere and be like, Deus Ex Tyson, and come and help, whatever.
Oh, so you think it's gonna be like it's a clobbering time type of situation?
Yeah, I feel like that's probably a logical moment for him to return. I don't know if that's going to be next chapter or the chapter after that. I don't know how long Rick Riordan would, like, extend your belief that he's dead. Like, it's balancing that of, like, oh, well, maybe you start to think, oh, I guess he is dead, and then just when you get convinced that that's true, then would be a good moment.
What I would say about that, B, is we're actually exactly halfway through this book, and, we still have a lot of rising action.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that could still happen, so I have no idea when Tyson's going to return or what's going to happen specifically with that. Again, I could be totally wrong and he's, like, actually dead as a doornail, but, like, that's not what I think is going to happen. That's not my impression of what happened. As far as, like, the title of the actual chapter, again, Rick Riordan loves to be, like, descriptive and yet not at the same time when it comes to chapters. So, like, I guess they're gonna go to a spa, and it's probably gonna be, like, somehow, like, hilariously mythological, like, this, who's Cece? What does that stand for? Probably some sort of mythical Greek thing that I've never heard about that we're gonna find out and learn about at some spa that they, like, get washed up on because they, got exploded and pushed away from the Sea of Monsters.
Well, they are technically in the Sea of Monsters. All I know is that Percy Jackson loves seaweed wraps on his face, and cucumbers.
Yeah, so I don't exactly know how all the pieces are going to fit together next chapter. I have a feeling like all of the characters are going to reunite except for Tyson, not right away anyway. If he's going to show up, it's probably going to be at the end of that chapter.
The funny thing, B, is this chapter is actually one of my favorites just because of all the situational stuff. But the next chapter, I think, is one of the best written chapters.
Yeah, we'll see. I have no idea what the plot will actually entail because, like, I don't think they didn't reach their destination clearly because we have so much left to do plot wise.
Oh yeah, there's still a lot to do, and I'm just snickering right now because I get the joke.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know all the stuff that needs to happen between then and now, and you've read these books already.
You know what, B? I'll tell you this. I knew the joke before I read Percy Jackson, and then I got the joke after high school.
We'll see what happens next. I don't know. I do think this is a good opportunity to have like Clarisse possibly be with them in a way that's like, you know, a fun like odd couple situation where they kind of don't like Clarisse, but now they really have to work together because they're like down to less resources and like things have broke bad, so to speak. But I don't actually know if they'll be like who they're going to run into after this explosion. Like, is Percy going to immediately encounter Clarisse again? I think Percy and Annabeth obviously need to reunite somehow. Like, I don't think they're all just going to be scattered to the winds, even though that literally is kind of what happened in the last chapters. Like, the winds escaped from the thermos and everyone's like, you know, being blown in all these directions.
Well, we'll find out next chapter, and I'm really excited to talk about it because I really enjoyed the next chapter as well.
Yeah, I have no idea. I hope Tyson's alive because I like him. I think he's sweet. I mean, he's kind of designed to make you like him, right? Like to break the expectations.
Yeah, it's kind of like the way I look at it. It's called like the puppy effect of having like a really adorable puppy. And then you know, it's almost like Marley and Me. The whole point of that, the marketing of that movie is this is going to be a very adorable dog movie. And then you watch and you're like, oh my God, stop.
I watched that movie with my cousins once after they had just lost 2 dogs. And it was the worst decision I've ever made. I forgot, like, they were just flipping through the channel and we see a dog movie. And I'm like, I know that the dog's gonna die in this friggin' movie. But we watch it anyway, and then they're, like, weeping. And then my aunt goes downstairs and she's just, like, really nonchalant. Like, honestly, if she wasn't actually chewing gum, she was emotionally chewing gum. And just kind of, like, comes downstairs and goes, like, oh, that dog is, like, behind the scenes, like, getting pets and a bunch of food. Like, that's an actor dog that's still alive. Like, and the kids were very comforted by the breaking of the fourth wall there. So, yeah, we got an email from Anna, who says, "Hey B and Z," crying laughing emoji. "I have really been enjoying your show. I love the Percy Jackson series and actually just reread the books before I found your podcast, so it is nice they are fresh in my mind, smiley face. I think your future episode on the Sea of Monsters movie will be very interesting, lol. Keep up the good work, Anna." Yeah, I can't imagine that movie is great.
And yet I still have to screen it for myself before I can approve it to watch it with B, unless we have to read another book.
Oh yeah, because of stuff that happens in it. Oh no.
B, I'm gonna like send you a message just to pray for me when I watch it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to watch it all by yourself.
I can cry. But thanks, Anna, for that wonderful message. We really appreciate it. So we have a message from Pearl. The message says, "Incoming Iris message. I found you through the research I was doing for my D&D campaign."
Oh, I saw this message. Yeah, you showed me this.
It's almost amazing because this is going to be a big shock upon shocks, but I'm a huge D&D fan.
Yeah, well, we did do that stream that one time.
Oh, yes, we did a D&D stream, which I think that was like your third time playing D&D?
Yeah, something like that. Maybe 4th time. I mean, like, my 4th, like, actual time I sat down. I only did one campaign before that, and I've, like, listened to, like, D&D podcasts, but I actually haven't really played that much.
I don't think I've ever told the story on the podcast, but I used to, back when I was, like, 16, and people should never do this now unless you want to end up on, like, a milk carton, is I would go to conventions and I would volunteer to be a dungeon master, and I would teach people how to play D&D, and then I would literally, when it became like 2 a.m., I would slump underneath the table and just fall asleep, so I didn't have to pay for a room. Don't do that.
Don't do that, kids. We're not advocating that.
No, but that's how much I liked playing D&D. That's like an actual Zack story. So the message from Pearl is, "Hi, Zack and B. I stumbled across your podcast while I was immersing myself into the books while doing research for the PGA-themed D&D campaign. I sold it to my players as a modern Greek mythology-themed campaign." Those are in quotation marks.
Not wrong.
You could, you know what you can call it, Pearl? You can call it Greek urban fantasy. And I've been binging through your podcast as part of my prep for our first session this weekend. Oh, so by the time this episode's out, they've already done their first session. So congratulations.
Oh yeah, that sounds really fun.
I love your podcast so much, and it's been super great to listen to you at work. And I've been learning so much through it, such as the existence of the German cover, the fact that Camp Half-Blood is a real summer camp in Brooklyn. Keep doing what you're doing, and pray for me that my first session as DM doesn't go down to Tartarus in flames. Hopefully not.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll go great. It sounds like a great concept. I'd love to see what people's characters are, if they're gonna like be based on the like setting.
Pearl, please send us like pictures of all this stuff.
Yeah, that would be really cool if people had like characters or character figurines or something.
Yeah, send us like any pictures and stuff. This would actually be really adorable to see. And if you want us to like record something to set the mood, like for a thing, or if you want us to be cool NPCs. Oh, but there's an extra addition to this. Also from Pearl. I accidentally sent this while listening to an episode where a listener sent in the correction about the German cover being a concept art and not the official cover. Finding out about Camp Half-Blood was still mind-blowing, though. Keep up the good work.
So this is from Caden. Hello, fellow humans, it's Caden again. I finished my art for Horsing Around. None of the images I used are mine. Credit goes to Google Images for helping me find them. And of course, the original authors. I was going to make it poster size, but I couldn't get my custom grass brush to work properly, so I cropped it. This was created lovingly while not paying attention in my Photoshop class, so I hope it's worth it. Loud growling sound, crash, bye. I feel a little bit bad that you didn't pay attention in Photoshop class to send us this image, but it is a very great image.
To be fair, this is actually like a really good Photoshop, so we can excuse that.
Yeah, it's a pretty great Photoshop. Wow, look at that. There's a lot going on.
We did get one iTunes review, and it's from Chloe. I love it. I'm a huge nerd for the Percy Jackson series and absolutely adore this podcast. I can't wait for B to meet such wonderful characters as Redacted and Redacted and Redacted, and every new character from Heroes of Olympus. Zack and B have an amazing dynamic, and I'm surprised... I'm surprised no one ships you two.
Oh, God.
I can't wait to see more new episodes. A giant fan, Chloe.
I forgot about this.
Thank you, Chloe, for that adorable message. Sorry if I like laughed midway through, but it's just, how do you approach this? I feel almost flattered that we've gotten to the point where people think that we're ship worthy. Neither of us actually. Yep. This is, I guess we've talked about this before. We don't really care for ships at all. That's why we don't really bring it up, because it's like there's much different things between like a teenage relationship and like an adult relationship.
Yeah.
It's also really creepy in Percy Jackson because they're all cousins. My favorite type of ship is actually the ship they actually use in this chapter, because it's like one of the very first steam-powered warships.
It's very sweet that you guys would think that, but again, we're buds. Also, I'm dating someone, but you know. Yeah, Zach is like my brother. 100%.
I really appreciate that you sent this message, Chloe. Really appreciate you as a fan. Shipping isn't really for us, unfortunately, but we really appreciate when people send us iTunes reviews. We're already up to 92. I don't even know 92 people. Our goal is to get to 100, so if you haven't put a star or put like a little comment, we'd really appreciate it. If we get to 100, I don't know, maybe we might throw a party or something.
What do we do? I don't know.
It's like almost insane the amount of like love and care that we get for our show. It's just two friends hanging out.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely give you a shout out on the show if you're like the 100th person. Last time I checked, there was like only 80 something, and now it's like it's growing every day.
It's like a hydra. Get one review, two more shall take its place.
Yeah, you cut the head and then it just keeps growing. Hopefully it's like that. Yeah, I hope more and more people find the show. I keep getting like messages and tweets from people who are like, "Oh my god, I didn't even know there was a Percy Jackson podcast. Oh my god, I really want to listen to you guys right now because I didn't even know that you existed." So I think there's definitely like people out there who like want to listen who don't even like know we exist. So that's something you could do. Like tell your friends if they like Percy Jackson, Rick Riordan, like tell them that we exist, that our show is a thing.
B, where can they find you?
You can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com and on Twitter at bkellygorman.
And if you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at Suda41, that's SUDA41. If you want to email our show, you can email us at radiocamphhalfblood@gmail.com. And if you want to tweet at us, you can tweet at us at halfblood_radio. This episode's sponsored by Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard, Book 3, The Ship of the Dead, now available in paperback where all good books are sold.
The epic finale in the Magnus Chase series out now on paperback, from where all good books are sold, also available in ebook and audiobook.
So if you like books about Vikings, Valkyries, and even falafel, you'll really enjoy the Magnus Chase series. And if you want to get more information about Rick Riordan and his wonderful works, you can actually subscribe to his newsletter at www.rickriordan.co.uk. You'll be able to connect with other fans to this newsletter. You'll see fan art, you'll see cosplay, you'll see little bits and pieces of funny Rick Riordan tweeting stuff, because Rick Riordan tweets some really funny stuff all the time.
He does. He tweeted some funny stuff just today, in fact.
Like, he's like one of the probably the most fun people to follow on Twitter other than R.L. Stein, because they just love the joke of being on Twitter, and just imagining Rick Riordan just as a middle-aged dad, just like on Twitter all day, texting to teenagers about funny memes and stuff that he's seen is adorable.
Yeah, he has a very dadly presence on the internet. It's great.
So check it out. Again, this episode is sponsored by Puffin Books UK, and now you can get Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard, Book 3, The Ship of the Dead, out now in paperback where all good books are sold, also available in ebook and audiobook. Well, B, I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And keep staying mortal. Bye.
Bye, guys.